In the mid-1800s, cities across Europe and North America began constructing underground sewage systems. The official narrative describes this as a response to cholera outbreaks and urban overcrowding, a logical progression of industrial-era public health reform. But the numbers don't align with the story. London's main sewer network, completed in 1865, was designed to serve a population of 4 million people. The city's actual population at the time was just over 3 million. Paris expanded its sewer system in the 1850s with tunnels wide enough to navigate by boat, tunnels that wouldn't see full utilization for another 30 years. And across dozens of American cities, from Boston to Chicago to San Francisco, sewage infrastructure appeared with capacity margins that wouldn't be filled until the early 20th century. They built for populations that didn't exist yet. This documentary examines historical infrastructure through the lens of timing, scale, and administrative patterns. It does not make definitive claims about lost civilizations or hidden history. Instead, it presents observations about the built environment, observations that remain difficult to reconcile with conventional explanations. The first friction point is capacity. In 1858, construction began on London's sewer system under engineer Joseph Bazalgette. The project involved 82 miles of main intercepting sewers and over 1,000 miles of street sewers. Bazalgette's design specifications called for pipes with diameters exceeding what the city's waste output required, by a significant margin. The standard explanation is that Bazalgette was simply forward-thinking. He anticipated growth. But anticipation doesn't explain precision. The system's capacity matched the needs of a London that wouldn't exist for another 40 years. Not approximately. Not within a reasonable margin. The infrastructure aligned with future demand as if reverse-engineered from a known endpoint. This pattern repeats. Boston's sewage system, begun in 1876, featured tunnels 12 feet in diameter, far larger than waste flow required. The city's population was roughly 350,000. The infrastructure could accommodate twice that. By the time the system reached capacity, it was 1920. Chicago's system, initiated in 1856, involved reversing the flow of the Chicago River and constructing a drainage canal that wouldn't operate at full capacity until 1900. The engineering required to reverse a river isn't incremental. It's total. And it was completed decades before the demand justified the expense. The same excess appears in Philadelphia, Baltimore, and Cincinnati. Each city built infrastructure calibrated to a future it couldn't have predicted with the tools available at the time. Population projections in the 19th century were notoriously unreliable. Immigration patterns, economic shifts, and disease outbreaks made forecasting difficult beyond a few years. Yet the systems fit. The second friction point is synchronization. Sewage projects across unconnected cities began within the same 15-year window. London started in 1858. Paris expanded in 1850. Hamburg rebuilt its system in 1842. Boston began in 1876. Chicago in 1856. New York's Croton Aqueduct, which fed into waste management systems, was completed in 1842. These cities didn't share governing bodies. They didn't share engineering firms. In many cases, they didn't even share diplomatic communication about infrastructure policy. But they all arrived at the same solution. At the same time. With the same level of over-engineering. The standard explanation is parallel development, that industrial cities faced similar problems and arrived at similar solutions independently. This is plausible for basic technology. It's less plausible for precise capacity matching across continents. The third friction point is uniformity. The systems didn't just share timing. They shared design philosophy. Gravity-fed, brick-lined, large-diameter tunnels became the default across Europe and North America. The materials were similar. The construction methods were similar. Even the administrative language used to justify the projects, public health, sanitation reform, civic duty, appeared in city records with striking consistency. It's as if the projects were following a template. But no centralized template existed. Or if it did, no records describe it. Consider the engineering itself. Building a sewer system requires accurate topographical surveys. It requires understanding groundwater flow, soil composition, and drainage gradients. Cities in the 1850s possessed this knowledge, but they possessed it suddenly. The expertise appeared. The institutional capacity appeared. The funding appeared. all within the same narrow historical window, and the systems themselves were built to last. London's sewers still function today. So do Paris's. The infrastructure wasn't designed for the 19th century. It was designed for permanence. The timing of these projects also coincides with a broader pattern of institutional formalization. The 1840s and 1850s saw the establishment of municipal water boards, public health commissions, and urban planning departments across multiple nations with no clear point of origin. The administrative infrastructure appeared alongside the physical infrastructure. Both exceeded immediate need. One explanation is that the Industrial Revolution simply required this level of coordination. Cities grew rapidly, and governments responded with large-scale projects. But that explanation assumes growth was predictable. It wasn't. The systems were built before the growth occurred, not in response to it. The capacity margins suggest something else, either access to information we can't account for or inheritance of systems designed by a different administrative structure. And that's where the label enters the conversation. But before we examine the interpretive frameworks, we need to understand the scale of what was built and how widely it appeared. Because the sewers were only the beginning, the pattern extends beyond sewage. In 1825, the Erie Canal opened across New York State, 363 miles of engineered waterway connecting the Great Lakes to the Atlantic Ocean. The project took 8 years and cost over $7 million, an enormous sum for a young nation with limited industrial capacity. The canal was designed to handle commercial traffic that didn't yet exist. When construction began in 1817, there were no Great Lakes shipping industries of significant scale. No established trade routes. No population centers large enough to justify the expense. The canal was built in anticipation of an economy that would take decades to materialize. By 1850, that economy had arrived. The canal operated at capacity. The infrastructure matched the demand perfectly. The same forward calibration appears in railway construction. Britain's railway boom began in the 1830s. By 1850, the country had over 6,000 miles of track, far more than passenger and freight demand required. Stations were built in towns with populations under 5,000. Double-track lines were laid where single tracks would have sufficed for decades. The infrastructure preceded the need. In the United States, transcontinental rail projects were proposed as early as the 1850s, when the West was largely unsettled. The first transcontinental line was completed in 1869, connecting territories that had no major population centers. The railway didn't follow settlement. Settlement followed the railway. But the railway had to be built first. Storage infrastructure shows the same excess. Grain elevators in Chicago, built in the 1850s, had capacity far beyond the city's agricultural output. The elevators were designed to handle shipments from farms that didn't yet exist. Farms that would only appear once the railroads made transport viable. It's circular preparation. The infrastructure enables the activity. But the infrastructure is built before the activity begins, as if the builders knew what was coming. Power grids follow the same logic. In the 1880s, cities began installing electrical distribution systems. New York's Pearl Street Station, opened in 1882, could power roughly 400 lamps. Within 2 years, capacity had expanded to serve 10,000 lamps, but the expansion was already planned before the first 400 were installed. London's electrical grid, initiated in the 1890s, was designed with substation locations that assumed a fully electrified city. Most of London wasn't electrified. Most buildings didn't have wiring. But the substations were positioned as if they did. The grid anticipated total adoption. And total adoption occurred, decades later, in the exact pattern the grid assumed. Water supply systems show identical characteristics. The Croton Aqueduct in New York, completed in 1842, delivered over 30 million gallons of water daily to a city that consumed less than half that amount. The excess wasn't a safety margin. It was structural. The aqueduct's capacity matched the needs of a New York that wouldn't exist until the 1880s. Boston's Cochituate Aqueduct, finished in 1848, delivered water at volumes the city couldn't use for another 30 years. Philadelphia's Fairmount Waterworks, expanded in the 1850s, operated below capacity until the turn of the century. These weren't mistakes. The systems were engineered with precision. The overcapacity was intentional. But intentionality requires knowledge. And the knowledge required to predict urban growth with this level of accuracy didn't exist in the 1840s. Population models were rudimentary. Economic forecasting was speculative. Immigration was unpredictable. Yet the infrastructure fits. Across cities that didn't communicate. Across nations with different governments. Across decades that should have produced variation. The administrative language is also consistent. Municipal records from London, Paris, Boston, and New York describe infrastructure projects using nearly identical justifications. Public health, civic improvement, modernization. The phrasing is similar. The bureaucratic structure is similar. The funding mechanisms are similar. It's as if the cities were following a shared administrative manual. But no such manual has been found. Consider the timing of institutional formation. In the 1840s and 1850s, cities across Europe and North America established water boards, sanitation commissions, and public works departments. These institutions appeared within the same narrow window, often with similar organizational structures. The institutions didn't evolve. They emerged, fully formed, with the capacity to manage infrastructure projects of enormous scale. The personnel existed. The expertise existed. The legal frameworks existed. All at once. The conventional explanation is that industrialization required this level of organization. Cities faced similar challenges and developed similar solutions. But that explanation assumes independent development. The evidence suggests coordination or inheritance. The infrastructure itself implies a different timeline. Systems built to serve populations decades in the future suggest either extraordinary foresight or construction atop existing frameworks. The choice between those explanations shapes how we interpret the built environment. One framework treats the overcapacity as visionary planning. Engineers anticipated growth and built accordingly. This explanation preserves the conventional timeline but requires accepting predictive accuracy that exceeds the tools available. Another framework treats the infrastructure as adaptive reuse. The systems were inherited from an earlier period and repurposed for 19th century populations. This explanation accounts for the scale but requires accepting continuity we can't document. A third framework treats the infrastructure as evidence of administrative knowledge that operated outside recorded history. The builders had access to information, maps, surveys, population data, that didn't survive in official records. All three frameworks fit the evidence. None resolve it. What remains is the infrastructure itself. Built too large. Built too early. Built with precision that exceeds explanation. And built everywhere at once. The label used to describe this pattern didn't originate in the 19th century. It came later. Much later. From a direction no one expected. The word Tartaria appears on European maps as early as the 15th century. It wasn't a nation. It was a geographical designation, a term used by Western cartographers to describe the vast territories of Central Asia and Siberia that lay beyond direct European contact. The term derived from Tatar, referring to Turkic and Mongolic peoples who inhabited the region. Over centuries, Tartaria became a catch-all label for unmapped or poorly understood lands stretching from the Caspian Sea to the Pacific Ocean. By the 19th century, the term had largely fallen out of use. Colonial expansion and improved cartography replaced vague designations with specific place names. Tartaria disappeared from official maps. It reappeared in the 21st century. Not as a geographical term, but as an interpretive framework, a way of organizing observations about infrastructure, architecture, and institutional patterns that don't align neatly with conventional timelines. The modern usage of Tartaria doesn't claim a lost empire. It functions as shorthand for a question. What explains the scale, timing, and uniformity of 19th century construction? Three interpretive models have emerged. The first model treats Tartaria as a metaphor for advanced industrial coordination. This view suggests that the 19th century saw a level of international cooperation and knowledge sharing that official records don't fully capture. Engineers, architects, and administrators may have operated through informal networks, disseminating plans and standards across borders without centralized documentation. This model accounts for the uniformity. It explains the simultaneous emergence of similar systems. It preserves the conventional timeline while acknowledging gaps in the historical record. The second model treats Tartaria as a placeholder for architectural inheritance. This view suggests that some 19th century infrastructure projects involved repurposing, expanding, or adapting older systems. Systems whose origins are either poorly documented or misattributed to later periods. The overcapacity would reflect not prediction but reuse. This model accounts for the scale. It explains why systems seem calibrated to future demand. They weren't built for the future. They were built for a past we've mislabeled. The third model treats Tartaria as evidence of administrative continuity across a disrupted period. This view focuses on the institutional knowledge required to execute large-scale projects. The sudden appearance of municipal commissions, engineering expertise, and funding mechanisms suggests either rapid development or the reactivation of existing structures. This model accounts for the timing. It explains the narrow window in which infrastructure and institutions appeared simultaneously. All three models address the same evidence. None can be dismissed outright. The choice between them depends on how much continuity one accepts, and how much disruption. The year without a summer returns to the frame. In 1816, global temperatures dropped following the eruption of Mount Tambora. Crops failed. Famine spread. Populations migrated. The disruption lasted years. And then, in the 1820s and 1830s, the infrastructure appeared. The timing raises questions. Not about causation but about recovery. How does a disrupted society mobilize resources for projects of this scale? How does institutional knowledge survive a period of crisis? One answer is resilience. Societies rebuild. Knowledge persists through written records, trained professionals, and institutional memory. Another answer is inheritance. The knowledge didn't need to survive the disruption because it predated the disruption. The infrastructure projects of the 1820s onward were restorations, not innovations. The evidence doesn't settle between these answers. It holds them in tension. The sewage systems remain. The canals remain. The railways, the aqueducts, the power grids, all still function. The infrastructure wasn't temporary. It was built to last centuries. And it has. What Tartaria represents in its modern usage isn't a conspiracy. It's a lens. A way of looking at the built environment and asking whether the timeline we've inherited fully accounts for what we see. The systems were built too large, too early, with too much uniformity. The explanations offered, visionary planning, parallel development, industrial necessity, fit some of the evidence. But they leave gaps. The gaps don't prove an alternative history. They suggest incompleteness in the standard one. The infrastructure itself is not ambiguous. It exists, can be measured. The capacity can be calculated. The construction dates are documented. What remains ambiguous is the context, the motivations, the knowledge base, the administrative structures that enabled projects of this scale across disconnected regions. Tartaria emerged as a term because the conventional vocabulary didn't accommodate the observations. It offers a framework for discussing patterns that span continents and decades, patterns that suggest either extraordinary coordination or shared inheritance. The label itself is less important than the questions it organizes. Why were sewage systems built for cities twice their size? Why did infrastructure projects begin simultaneously across unconnected regions? Why does the built environment of the 19th century feel engineered to a standard that shouldn't have existed yet? These aren't rhetorical questions. They're architectural ones, historical ones. They invite examination of records, structures, and timelines without requiring conclusions. The evidence remains open. The sewers still run beneath London, Paris, Boston, and New York. The tunnels are still wider than necessary. The systems still function beyond their intended lifespan. They were built for a population that hadn't arrived. And when that population did arrive, the infrastructure was waiting, precisely calibrated, as if it had always known they were coming.